Let's get this over with. Hey everybody, Sage here, and welcome back to another computer showcase. But not just any computer showcase, a Macintosh computer showcase. So you know what that means. It's time for me to pull out the oldest Mac I have in my collection, the Macintosh Classic. But first, a little background. When the Macintosh first came out in the market, it was aimed at introducing the graphical user interface directly to the general consumer. But the then head of Macintosh product development, Jean-Louis Gassi, had other plans. He wanted the Mac to be more expandable and aimed at the higher end market, which resulted in the creation of the Macintosh SE and the Macintosh 2 respectively. And while both systems were fairly decent for the time, they came at a rather expensive price tag. From there, almost every new Mac released throughout the late 80s was more expensive than the other, to the point that by the time the Macintosh 2 FX came out, which was the fastest Macintosh on the market at the time, it costed a whopping $9,000. It seemed as if the pricing of the Mac had nowhere to go but up. Meanwhile, the low-end consumer market was being dominated by IBM PC-compatible clones, and Apple engineers desperately want to enter that market, but they couldn't. Every time they tried, Gassi would put a stop to it, arguing that consumers would be willing to spend more money for the Macintosh experience. But after a disappointing 1989 holiday season, Gassi was forced out of the company by then CEO John Sculley, much to the rejoice of the Apple engineers. They then quickly went to work on creating a new set of low-cost Macintoshes, which would eventually become the LC, the 2SI, and of course, the Macintosh Classic, all of which were introduced on October 15th, 1990, and were a hit. But we're focusing on the Macintosh Classic here, which particularly did well in the education market and would go on to sell over 1 million units. Even after the Macintosh Classic 2's release in 1991, the original continued to sell up until 1992, when it was replaced by the Performa 200, the consumer version of the Classic 2. But enough history. Let's take a look at the actual system itself. Now, this computer served as the successor to both the Macintosh SE and the Macintosh Plus, the latter of which by that time was over 4 years old, and despite it being an iconic design, it needed a sleeker, more modern look. Thus, the design of the system was made more of a mixture between the Plus and the SE, particularly the stripe across the front bezel. And speaking of the front, let's take a look at it. So on the front, you've got a 9-inch CRT display, the same one used on the original Macintoshes, which supports a screen resolution of 512 by 342, and it can only display 2 colors, black and white. No grays, no colors. Below that, you've got the floppy drive, which is actually a super drive, not the optical drive kind. And right next to it, you've got a force eject hole where you can put a paperclip in there to force eject a floppy. And what's really cool about this particular floppy drive compared to the earlier Macintoshes is that it supports the industry standard 1.44 megabyte floppies, which means you don't need proprietary 800K floppies unlike its predecessors. And below that, you've got the rainbow-colored Apple logo, along with the Macintosh Classic name printed on the plastic. Now, here's an interesting fact about the name. Apple actually had to license the Classic name from another company, ModComp, or Modular Computer Systems. Apple paid about $1 million to use the name for 5 years, which they ended up not renewing. But do you want to know who owned ModComp at the time? The Daimler-Benz Corporation, who you may know for their Mercedes-Benz vehicles. So that's interesting to say the least. On the right side, there's nothing particularly special to look at. On the left side, you've got the programmer switch, or the interrupt button, as some people call it, and the reset button. And over on this side is where the speaker is. However, there's no cutout for it. And that's because the initial production run of Macintosh Classics did not have a cutout for the speaker. Thus, sound coming from the speaker may sound a little muffled. It wasn't until the later production models that a cutout for the speaker was added. On the back of the unit, we've got the carrying handle for carrying the Macintosh Classic around. And below that, you've got more information about the unit, including the model number and the FCC ID, among other things, all etched into the plastic. Right next to that is the serial number along with the manufacturing date for this computer. This particular unit was manufactured in April of 1991, and right next to that is event. Below the labels, you've got the security slot right here, and below that, you've got all the old proprietary Apple ports. You've got an Apple Desktop Bus port for connecting a keyboard and mouse, a DB-19 external floppy port, a DB-25 SCSI parallel port for connecting an external hard drive. You've got 2 serial ports, one for the printer and one for the modem, an audio out port for external speakers or headphones, And right above that, you've got the power supply consisting of the AC power port and the I/O switch for turning the computer on and off. And above that, we've got a plastic plate, which when pried off with a flat tip screwdriver, allows the user to adjust the CRT display, including the brightness and contrast, the horizontal and vertical centering and size, and the focus, all by adjusting the various pentiometers on the back. So now we'll take a look at the insides, and thanks to the power of editing, I already have the back cover taken off. On the bottom, you've got the heart of the system, the logic board, which can easily be removed by just sliding it right out after disconnecting the main cables. On the left of that, you've got the RAM expansion card, which I'll talk about later. And right next to that, you've got the metal bracket, which holds both the hard drive and the floppy drive. And on the right, you've got the analog board, which controls the high voltage components for both the CRT and the computer's power supply. So now let's talk about the specifications of this computer. The Macintosh Classic has a Motorola 68000 processor clocked at 8 MHz, the same processor used on the original Macintosh. The system also has 1 MB of onboard memory, but as I mentioned before, it can be upgraded with the use of a RAM expansion card, which adds an extra 1 MB of memory, plus 2 SIM slots to add an extra 2 MB of RAM, upping the system to 4 MB. Now, Apple claims that the Macintosh Classic is slightly faster than both the Plus and the SE, and to an extent, that is correct. The minimum memory speed on the Macintosh Classic is about 120 nanoseconds, or about 8.3 MHz, while the Macintosh Plus and the SE have a minimum memory speed of about 150 nanoseconds, or about 6.7 MHz. Thus, the Macintosh Classic is slightly faster from a memory standpoint, while still using the same processor as its predecessors. As I mentioned before, the Mac Classic has a 1.44 MB floppy drive as standard, but you could also configure the system to have an optional 40 MB SCSI hard drive. And on my particular machine, the hard drive in it still works to this day, which is quite surprising considering how scarce working SCSI drives are these days. Now, of course, there are some modern solutions to replacing these noisy SCSI drives, such as SCSI to SD or Blue SCSI, whichever one you prefer. But for now, this hard drive is still kicking to this very day. And with all those parts combined, the Macintosh Classic weighs about 16 pounds, or about 7.3 kilograms. So now let's talk about the configurations. The Macintosh Classic initially came in 2 configurations. The first was a floppy-only configuration with 1 MB of onboard RAM that went for $999 US. This makes the Macintosh Classic the first Mac to cost under $1,000. But if you are an education customer, you could get the system for as low as $799 US. This not only made the system affordable to consumers, but also to education customers. The second configuration had a hard disk and double the memory through the expansion card, and that went for $1,499 US, $500 more than the base configuration, which was still not bad. Even though the system was notable for being the first Mac priced under $1,000 back in the day, in order to reach that low price tag, they had to manufacture it as cheap as possible. Most notably on the logic board side of things. The logic board is based on the Macintosh SEs, albeit reduced to about half the size, and used surface mount components to keep costs down. But that came at a, well, cost, and it mostly has to do with the capacitors on the board. You see, the Macintosh Classic, among other early 90s Macs, used electrolytic capacitors, which holds electrolyte fluid. Now, these capacitors had a limited lifespan, and once it reached the end of that lifespan, they begin to leak. And when they leak, it can cause all sorts of problems, such as the sound being barely audible, even with the volume cranked up, the clock intermittently not working right, and of course, the computer starting up with the infamous checkerboard pattern, usually caused by a memory failure, which again is caused by the electrolytic fluid shorting the board. Luckily, there are some temporary fixes, like cleaning the logic board with soap and water or scrubbing it with isopropyl alcohol. But like I said, it's only temporary. The permanent fix is to replace the capacitors entirely, which is what I ended up doing on this machine. But enough technical talk for now. Let's get the machine put back together so we can start her up. Alright, so I put the system back together, and I also have the original keyboard and mouse plugged in, the Apple Keyboard 2, and the Apple Desktop Bus mouse. So, software-wise, the Macintosh Classic originally came with System 6.0.7 out of the box. It was originally, however, going to include 6.0.6, but due to a major bug, it was never officially released. The latest Mac OS this system can support is System 7.5.5, released in 1996, as the last major Mac OS release to be compatible with anything below a 68030. What I have installed on the hard drive is System 6.0.8, which is merely an update to 6.0.7. But anyways, you've waited long enough. Let's turn the machine on. And there's the startup chime that originated from the original Macintosh. Any second now it should boot to the operating system. And there we go. So here you are in the desktop. It took a few tries to get to it. So let me go ahead and run the About the Finder screen here. And as you can see, we're running System 6.0.8, and we've got 4 megabytes of RAM, 3.5 megabytes of available memory. So let's take a little look at the hard drive. I've got some data loaded up on here that I think you guys might like. So I've got the original Macintosh Productivity Suite installed, MacWrite, MacPaint, and MacDraw. So we'll load up MacWrite. I also have Teach Text in there, but it's just a basic text editor. So here's MacWrite. This is the original version 2.2. Doesn't show a copyright for some reason. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. We can select that, and we can change the font to whatever we want. We can also change its size. Just a basic word processor, nothing spectacular. No, I don't want to save. And then we have MacPaint, which originally came with the first Macintosh. MacPaint by Bill Atkinson. I'm not really a good painter, but I can try to draw the original hello in cursive here. There we go. That's the best I can do. So let's take a look at the About screen here. MacPaint version 1.3, compiled in 2014. So this must be a newer compile, but it is copyrighted 1983 by Apple. And then finally we've got MacDraw, which is vector-based graphics and all that sort of stuff. This one takes a little while longer to load. So we can create all sorts of illustrations and whatnot, like a basic car, I guess. We can create like squares, circles, and we can even duplicate here. So we can create 2 circles. And there we go, we got our basic car here. What's also pretty cool about this particular tool is the Arrange menu, which pretty much has the same functions that you would see in something like Keynote in the latest Mac OS. As a matter of fact, most of these functions are still present, which is pretty cool to say the least. But enough about that, let's look at the About screen. MacDraw version 1.7, March 18th, 1985. And seeing how it's Macintosh, it's perfect timing. But it's not just the basic applications, there's also utilities that I have loaded on the system, and most of them are in the control panel here. So the first tool I want to show off here is Close View, which is a screen magnification utility. So you can enable Close View by turning it on, and as you can see, the screen flashes and a frame is shown on the screen, so you can move it around. And you can turn on magnification just like that. And as you can see, the screen is now magnified and all software driven, which is pretty cool. You also get some other tools like the ability to reverse the colors. So for those who want to read white text on black, you can do that. And what's also pretty cool is that you can use Close View while you type. So for example, if I'm typing something in to say keycaps, I can type something in and the frame automatically locks to the insertion point as I type. So that's pretty cool. But what you may not know about Close View is that it wasn't actually a creation of Apple's at all. It was actually licensed from another company called Berkeley Systems. And if that name sounds familiar, they're the same company that would go on to develop You Don't Know Jack, the irreverent trivia party game with Jellyvision, now known as Jackbox Games. And Close View is basically an entry-level version of Enlarge, which contains some more advanced features that are not present in Close View. Another utility from that same company is Stepping Out, which is a screen resolution extender for the Macintosh. So instead of zooming in on an existing screen resolution, you extend the screen resolution. Now, Stepping Out only works if I have Close View turned off, so I won't be able to demo it here, but I promise you it does work really well. And it can even support resolutions up to over 2000 pixels by up to over 2000 pixels. So you can actually try to do 1080p resolution with stepping out, albeit at the cost of memory. Stepping out also has some screen magnification features as well. Berkeley Systems also developed another piece of software called Outspoken, or as I like to call it, the grandfather of macOS VoiceOver. But I couldn't be bothered to install it on this machine. But what Berkeley Systems is very well known for is their piece of screensaver software called After Dark, which was considered the first commercially released modular screensaver software, first released back in 1989. Now, what I'm running right here is version 2, which contains the famous flying toaster screensaver, as you can see right here. So, there you go. But After Dark also has a bunch of other screensavers that the user can select from. One of these is called Warp, one of the original After Dark screensavers, which may look familiar to some Windows users out there. And you can definitely see why. This screensaver actually predates Starfield Simulation by about a year. So, pretty interesting to say the least. But it's not just applications and utilities that I have installed on this computer. I also have some games installed. Now, I won't be demonstrating all of the games here, but I will showcase some of my personal favorites. Starting with one of the original Mac games, Amazing, which originally came bundled with the Macintosh at the time of its release, back in 1984. So let's just go ahead and play a little bit of it here. Now, I have played this puzzle before, so I should know where to go. Hopefully. Any second now, we should be at the end. And there you go. And we got a penguin playing a trumpet to signify that you have reached the end of the maze. But that game was nowhere near as fun as Lode Runner, one of my favorite games to play on this vintage Macintosh here. So here's Lode Runner by Broderbund Software, one of Broderbund's original games. So I'll go ahead and play a little match here. Just maybe one level's fine. This one doesn't use the arrow keys to control the player. You actually have to use the letters on the keyboard. I believe it's IJKL or something like that. So, yep. It's actually quite a fun game. So you have to collect all the money in the game while avoiding these little police guys or whatever the heck they are. Alright, looks like we've got a corner here. There we go. Like I said, it's a pretty fun game to play. Alright, so I should be able to reach the end, but first I gotta wait here. Alright, there we go. And there we go. Well, that was fun while it lasted, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop the game right here. Yes, I want to end. And yes, I have played this game quite a lot on this computer. I did make it up to level 6, which is pretty good. Another game that I like to play is Stunt Copter. So the aim of the game here is you play as this helicopter and you have to try to drop some people onto this wagon here safely. So let's play. Try going to the cloud here. There we go. Oh! I landed on the farmer. Alright, let's try that again. So I guess if you land on the farmer or the horse, it's game over immediately. Alright, let's try that cloud again. There we go. And the last one. And there we go. And we're already at level 2, but I'm not going to bother with that. Now, this technically doesn't count as a game, but I'm going to count it anyway. The original Kid Pix from 1989 by Craig Hickman, who I believe regained the rights to Kid Pix. This is also the public domain version of the original Kid Pix, so you got all the original tools and stickers and everything, which is nice. You even got the famous dog here that you can stamp. Of course, there's no sound in this one, but yeah. And there's also some pretty cool effects you can put in, like these Pac-Mans or whatever they're called. Got some branches. You've got these whatever they're called. And of course, let's not forget this. Amazing. But You get the idea. Now, we could play some of the other games in this folder, but what I really wanted to show you is a much more recent game that came out for these old Macs, and it's called Flappy Mac. Remember Flappy Bird? Well, someone made a version of it for these old Macs. And it actually looks quite good. It also plays really well, too. So let's go to the About screen here. Flappy Mac version 1.1, copyright 2021-2022. So this is a much more recent example. And you can actually download this for free on this website right here, so you can check it out for yourself. So I'm just going to go ahead and play a little bit of it here. It says click to flap. I'm going to use the space bar since it's a lot easier on me. I have practiced this game before, just letting you know. I did notice there is a bit of input lag in this. If you try to do it through emulation, it's a lot easier though. Let's see if I can try to make it to 10 here. Nope. It sounds a little quiet though, which is kind of strange. Nope. Oh, this is harder than I anticipated. I got a new high score, though. And there we go. So I got 11, which means I get a new character. Let's see what it is. Happy Mac XL. This is actually my favorite background from this game here. Seems a little easier than the other one. So far, this seems to be a pretty fun game. A pretty addictive one at that. So you get the idea. That is Flappy Mac. A pretty decent clone of Flappy Bird for the original Macintoshes. So that is all I'm going to show off in terms of the contents on this hard drive. But before I do finish off this episode, I do want to show off a few other things. And those are the Easter eggs that come with this computer. So I'm going to go ahead and restart. And I'm going to hold down a key combination of Command-Option-XO, and you'll see what happens. So I'm holding down the keys right now, and it should boot into a built-in operating system in ROM. But as you can see, it says it's trying to rebuild the desktop, so I'm just going to cancel here. So there is, in fact, an operating system in ROM. System 6.0.3 to be exact. This actually allows the system to be usable without both the hard drive and the floppy drive. And you can even navigate through the contents of the boot disk if you want to, like this here. Now there really isn't that much on the ROM, aside from a few basic system files, but still, pretty cool nonetheless. There's also one other example I want to show off, and that involves the debugging screen, which can be activated by pressing the programmer switch on the side of the computer. So what you can do is you can type in some codes here, and some of the codes are actually Easter eggs available in certain Macintosh computers. One example is when you type in G space 41D89A and then hit enter, and on a Macintosh SE it shows a picture of the development team in a slideshow-like format. Now I did try this code on the Macintosh Classic, but all I got was a slideshow of garbled screens. But one Easter egg I do want to show off here is when you type in G space 4188A4. And as you can see, the Apple logo in the corner changes with some text that says, stolen from Apple computer. Now, there's actually a bit of backstory behind this. Back in the early 80s, there was a company called Franklin Computer that made Apple II clones, which directly copied the Apple II ROM and code. So it was no surprise that they got sued by Apple. Although Franklin Computer initially won the case, they ultimately lost after Apple appealed and won, thus forcing Franklin to take their clones off the market. So if you ever wondered where that Easter egg came from, there's your reason why. And it's even possible to still use the system with that thing still on the screen. Of course, you have to press the debug screen and type G, and yeah, the system is actually usable with that little thing on the screen, which is pretty cool. And of course, I can't forget to show off that one thing that I do on this vintage Mac here. Pressing the interrupt button on the Happy Mac screen, which turns the Happy Mac into a sad Mac. Now, some Macs did have a death chime whenever the system got a sad Mac. But on this particular machine, it doesn't have one. So there you have it, the Macintosh Classic. Overall, despite its numerous problems, it still remains one of my favorite vintage Macs. If you're able to find one in working condition, it's a neat collector's piece to have, as long as you keep it in good shape both inside and outside. Without the Macintosh Classic, I don't think Apple's Mac lineup would be as relevant as it is today. If you'd like to see more computer showcases like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And as always, I've got some more goodies coming on the horizon. For now though, I think it's time that I turn the computer off. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Take care.